Today on Chainlinked, we'll speak with Chen, CEO and co-founder at Injective Labs, about Injective's approach to Layer 2 scaling and how their specific architecture takes advantage of a unique Chainlink Oracle feature. Chainlinked is a Web3 podcast series talking to the builders in the Chainlink ecosystem. We get to know the human side of the people bringing the many applications of Chainlink blockchain middleware to life. My name is Dr. Andy Boyan. You can call me Andy, and I'll be your host. Layer 2 solutions are a critical piece of scaling Web3 technology to the speeds and volumes needed to get all the things that can go on-chain actually working on-chain. Often, Layer 1 blockchains have legacy architecture that slows down transaction speeds and results in a user experience that can be prohibitive for average users or new users. Layer 2s then speed things up. Layer 2s verify transactions on their own and then report that information in some way to the Layer 1 base chain. Different L2s, or Layer 2s, have different methods for doing this. And that's where it gets technical, but the core Layer 2 technology is about securely verifying that a transaction took place and was honest, and then reports the transactions to a Layer 1 in a secure manner, according to the Layer 1's technology and security requirements. End users need to access Layer 2s directly right now, manually. Think of it like switching from Hulu to Netflix on a smart TV. You're still on your base browser, in this case, your TV, but when you switch from Hulu to Netflix, the shows are usually different, and the interface isn't quite the same. Layer 2s have a deeper set of technical differences, but the metaphor here is just to highlight that right now, users are manually swapping between Layer 1 and various Layer 2s to access different dApps and experiences. Chainlink is special because it's not a blockchain or a Layer 2. It's middleware. Chainlink connects data from off-chain to on-chain and back the other direction as well. And it doesn't matter what blockchain or L2 you're on. Chainlink is blockchain agnostic, which is why we see so many Layer 2s integrating Chainlink, because it makes data that's critical for dApps available wherever they are and wherever they might build next. Now, let's join a conversation that I recently had with Chen talking about the Injective protocol. Injective is a bespoke Layer 2 that uses Chainlink oracles to create secure DeFi markets. And it's notable that the agnostic Chainlink architecture is not only compatible with Injective technology, but provides a unique functionality embedded in the Chainlink Price Feeds that helps distinguish Injective as a protocol. Eric, welcome to Chainlink. How are you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going? Really appreciate being here.
Let's take a minute and get to know you for a little bit. What are you an expert in besides finance and Web3? Like, what's your vibe elsewhere in the universe?
Honestly, I feel like this has been my life for the past God knows when. So I don't think I'm good at anything but that. I feel like I'm good at making memes, but then, one of my good friend, Bernd Banksy, is far superior in making memes than me. So I decided to give up on that too.
I think making memes, it's not about popularity always. It's about like whether you appreciate it. It's like a good dad joke. I know a dad joke is good, whether or not my family likes it. So it's okay. You can take memes from that. I appreciate that. What are you reading lately?
Basically, daily law. Every day I would kind of flip around. It's kind of like the culmination of all of his previous works. Laws of Human Nature, like Mastery, like the infamous 48 Laws of Power. So it's perfect for me because right now, obviously we're pretty busy with mainnet stuff and, launching campaigns and stuff like that. So it allows me to hey, today I forgot, what was the book about? So I'm just jumping into a random page and it'll be a completely independent content. So that's been pretty helpful.
I want to learn a little bit more about you and Injective and Web3 in general. So let's get started kind of at a philosophical level. To you, why does decentralization matter? What is it about Web3 that's useful or important?
Yeah, so I think generally in any type of world or any type of, I would say, civilization, there's generally a path towards decentralization, right? Human society generally started off with tribe leaders, and it really started off in kind of like a countless leader society where, there's tribes and subgroups of tribes, there's a leader, and then, different leaders band together. And it eventually evolves into kind of I guess, back in the day, the Roman Empire, where, Congress eventually became an emperor. And it's very clear after a couple hundred or maybe, a couple thousand years that that's not a sustainable model. Obviously, as you know now, monarchy has generally subsided. So I think decentralization is almost like a human progression. It demonstrates, the empowerment of individual control and value, and really basically allows us to, it's really a signal of advancements and innovation where, individual responsibility trumps over central control. And I think, like money is probably the most fundamental part of society as we know it right now. So decentralizing that and, all the financing around it is definitely a critical movement for the future.
That's really interesting. I've got a friend who claims that all things move towards centralization. And that doesn't make sense with entropy and the laws of physics to me, but maybe the case is you're both right. And in fact, things oscillate. And there's movements to decentralization and centralization in society and shifts in physics and finance and all sorts of things. That may be for the complex adaptive system scientists to figure out, but it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, like you can imagine things like whenever there's a completely new paradigm and, like individual power doesn't really have that much, I would say, control over like a new thing, then obviously centralization is the trend. But in the long term, when, that innovation matures or like that system matures, decentralization matters. It'll come back relevant later, of course.
I'm thinking back to my Structure of Scientific Revolutions reading from Kuhn. I'll review that another time. We don't need to do a full book report on this one. Let's learn a little bit about Injective as a finance protocol and kind of as its own layer two. Tell us a little bit about like what is it, how does it work, and kind of what differentiates it as a layer two.
So Injective is kind of like the generalized exchange protocol for a lot of cross-chain DeFi related transactions and needs. It allows anyone to access, create, and trade pretty much any type of decentralized finance primitives or markets on Injective. And the core infrastructure for Injective itself is a very fast and very secure and fully decentralized type of blockchain that supports a very efficient and optimized order book plus matching engine. So we kind of built a very fundamental infrastructure that was not being really seen within like any type of layer one or like any type of fundamental infrastructure, and kind of expand an entire ecosystem from the ground up around it. So from a layer two perspective, obviously this chain, the consensus is independent, but it doesn't have, availability issues. It doesn't have uptime issues, or basically it doesn't rely upon a single node for any type of, outage issues. So basically it allows kind of like an independent consensus to scale, beyond Ethereum while having a completely Ethereum native experience, which is extremely important, I think, for the long run.
So we briefly talked before this recording about EVM, which stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine. It's kind of become the standard of programming on general purpose blockchains to do smart contracts, make NFTs, build decentralized finance applications, things like that. Is Injective an EVM, or how is it different?
So in the most fundamental layer, it's not EVM. Obviously, for placing derivative orders or spot orders, there's a lot of logics and basically checks required to make sure that the order book is clean and matched and pruned. So that layer is not EVM. And right now, we're kind of perfecting this fundamental layer, plus, the entire derivative module and stuff like that. But we are going to integrate kind of like a EVM layer on top of everything to allow for, more interesting and more versatile interoperability with it.
Cool. That makes sense. So it's interesting that it's built as this custom chain for trading, and then you can add other modules on top of it as you move forward. Does that sound correct?
Yeah, exactly. Basically, we have this order book infrastructure that was pretty daunting to build in the beginning, and we realized there's so much possibilities, and that's why we decided to support derivative, because we realized that it's probably the most complex type of order book infrastructure there is in the current financial system.
Now, I read somewhere in your materials about being linked to IBC and Cosmos. Is this a Tendermint-based chain? Like, is that how it works, or
Exactly.
What's the relationship there?
So we made an upgrade kind of during the testing phase towards the latest version of Cosmos. And that basically enables us to be integrated with like IBC. And we did a proposal for, first of all, starting an IBC transfer between Injective Chain and Cosmos Hub. So now, users can deposit Atom tokens onto Injective. And obviously, this is kind of our test case for like accessing the entire Cosmos ecosystem and really gaining ground on this entire, IBC enabled future. Because I think what people don't fully understand is that, first of all, like IBC at the end of the day is just a communication standard, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that only Cosmos zones can interact with it. Solana can also build like an IBC enabled bridge to connect with any type of Cosmos zone chain.
Chainlink oracles are blockchain agnostic as well. Your integration for price feeds, power markets on the canonical chain mainnet that recently launched, right?
Correct.
All right. Congratulations on a recent launch of the Injective Canonical Chain mainnet. I was wondering about some of the features of the mainnet and how do Chainlink oracles play a role?
I think Chainlink Oracle is one of the most exciting Oracle integrations we've ever worked on, mainly because this is one of the first few instances where we get very, very fast and very, very cheap, actually, Oracle price updates without actually relying on Ethereum. Because pre-OCR days, generally Chainlink will have to push the price fee on top of Ethereum. And obviously, slowly it becomes somewhat infeasible for a lot of, Chainlink operators to consistently pay that Ethereum gas price and then, push the price, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also constrained to the 15-second block time. And for something as Oracle dependent and responsiveness as derivative markets, it actually becomes kind of weak for a very liquid pair, let's say, BTC perpetual markets or Ethereum perpetual markets to be using, something that updates every 15 seconds. So yeah, OCR is definitely something that's extremely exciting to me because this kind of breaks the bounds of Ethereum and, move the entire world towards a multi-chain future.
That's awesome to hear. A lot of times, a lot of chains, they will integrate Chainlink. They'll go into mainnet and they'll be excited because now other DeFi platforms can build using Chainlink oracles. It's cool to hear that using the OCR feeds and being able to update quickly and cheaply is this feature that lets the derivatives and markets engine work with you guys. That's just a really neat differentiator.
Yeah, and I think one other exciting thing is that our integration is very much, kind of like a stepping stone towards every single Cosmos zone for integrating Chainlink, right? Because it'll be sitting as a module, so it'll make it very easy for other Cosmos zones to, add this module and integrate with Chainlink, and eventually, getting the price fee from the great Chainlink ecosystem.
Some of your materials talk about decentralization as, core mission, decentralize as much of the DeFi stack as possible. What are some of the technical features that Canonical Chain has implemented? How does Chainlink play a role in this decentralization mission?
Yeah, I think this is definitely the most fundamental cornerstone of the injective community and the overall injective ecosystem is that it can't be controlled for any type of operation or process by a single party or a single entity. And every single user experience, every single user action, and every single step within any type of transaction really embody this. So if you look at, a lot of L2 solutions, if you look at, a lot of kind of like data or computation intensive operations, they generally make the call to sacrifice decentralization in order to achieve a certain throughput or to achieve a certain user experience optimization. And this is basically something that we consistently say no to. In our case, having every single order to be on chain, having the entire order book to be on chain, to having that matching engine to be designed in a very, very much kind of like a blockchain centric way is very key to our philosophy.
So on that note, as you work towards more decentralization, what's hard to decentralize in Web3, or what was really hard? Like what's one of those core problems where things tend towards centralization? You really have to resist against that and find innovative solutions.
This is a question that we battle with every step of the way. There's always something that, hey, like it probably makes more sense or makes our lives a lot easier to make this more centralized or have a certain central party to be doing the service. But, time and time again, we decide to avoid this path, right? So if you want me to name something that's like very hard, I can name like probably 10 of them. But I would say generally, definitely the hardest would be how to minimize kind of external intervention, ensuring, sanity and stability of the protocol. And I can dive into a little bit more example around it. But generally, like initially injective markets are designed to be permissionless, as in basically anyone can launch any market without intervention from governance and without, like ever having to deal with basically listing or like convincing the community to list this market. And it very quickly became impractical because there are so many attack vectors that will plague the protocol. And it creates a lot of responsibility by relayers to prune through the data and list the markets that they desire. And just in general, it kind of creates this tragedy of the common issue where too many markets are in place. And, given it's an order book infrastructure, then, like important markets and liquid markets may take a toll as well. And so that's why currently, any type of market that goes on that's being supported, it requires governance intervention. But we just designed like kind of like a saving grace or like caveat to this, where community members can instantly launch a market without going past or waiting for 2 days for governance. And how it works is that it's kind of like a bonded market, where in order to launch this market, the market creator would have to bond their token for a certain period. And let's say, depending on obviously what the community decides on for the period, after 7 days, the governance decides, this is still not a sensible market, or after 2 weeks, like this is not a sensible market, the market will still be gone. But it allows this community to feel like, hey, markets can be created very seamlessly, and it doesn't require governance to vote on it for 2 days and maybe, lose that market or that opportunity.
I know I get a creative founder when I ask, what's a problem you had to solve? And you get really excited about how you solved a particular issue. Those are always interesting to hear. Great insights into the product creation process. What's your next strategy for mass adoption and really getting new users and traders?
For mass adoption and attract new users, that's what Astro is for. And basically, it's currently 10 million INJs being allocated towards this incentive program over actually a pretty short time frame to bring liquidity and traders to Injective ecosystem. And basically, 7 million of which equates to around, I guess, 70-ish or $80 million worth is being allocated towards basically trading participants. Whenever they trade, they'll earn a little bit of reward, and it will be shared, with the entire community, like everyone who uses the protocol. And that's something I honestly very much looking forward to, because it allows, people and early adopters to be rewarded. And, this is really a community driven process, because every single community member in Injective really talked about it very extensively and really aligned and, voted on the governance proposal for it. So I'm really excited and looking forward for everyone to check it out. And I think for people, the best way to get started on Injective is hub.injective.network, which is kind of like the starting place for everything. It allows people to look at a wallet, to bridge, and also to look at all the exchange relayers that are on Injective right now.
Eric, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for coming and talking to me.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks to Eric for joining me for that discussion. Now, listeners, if you have questions or thoughts about the episode or Layer 2s, leave me a comment on Twitter @AndyBoyan. Next, help me grow the Chainlink podcast and give more projects a voice to speak to the Chainlink community and beyond. Rate and review on Apple Podcasts or whatever your favorite podcasting app is. Make sure to follow Chainlink on Spotify as well. You can follow me on Twitter @AndyBoyan and share this episode with your friends. Also, follow Chainlink Today on Twitter @ChainlinkToday and read more about the stories behind the industry's top projects. While you're joining things, join the Chainlink communities, find other Web3 explorers in the Chainlink Telegram and Discord chats. Thank you for hanging out. I'll catch you next time.